So we have an interesting lineup of speakers. I'll introduce them in the order in which they'll be speaking. First of all, we have Keri, who's the chair of visual arts here at Cronin, and she's also the author of Manufacturing National Park Nature, which looks at visual representations of wildlife and the environment. Also, the organizer of Veg Fest Niagara, which is happening June the 1st, I think, so let's get ready for that. It should be fun. She's a cat rescuer and just finished up her internship at Farm Sanctuary, so she's a dynamo. I need to find out what kind of vitamins she's taking so I can catch up with her. So she's going to talk about dogs in vivisection and the role of imagery and activist campaigns historically, and anti-vivisection campaigns historically. And then we'll have Liz Smith, who's from Animal Alliance in Toronto. She's a longtime activist and animal advocate. She was formerly a head of the Toronto Humane Society, and she's been active in all sorts of animal advocacy issues, especially legal issues, working on changing animal anti-cruelty laws in Canada. And she's also organized the Environment Voters Party to raise issues, which is a federally registered party, to raise issues that other political parties aren't addressing. So very interesting to hear from her. Also speaking about dogs in vivisection and the issue of pound seizure. After that, we're going to move on to a section that we call Dog Champions. And we'll have Murray Wickett from the Department of History here at Brock. He's just finished up his term as chair. That's why he looks so happy over there. He's the author of a book called Contested Territory, which is about the history of racism and race relations in the United States. And I think he's working on a new book about slavery in California. So because of his interest in these forms of oppression and exploitation, he naturally sees the connection with animal advocacy as well. And he's a really solid animal activist. He's going to talk about his experiences in rescuing animals from the situation in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina. Went there and rescued a whole truckload of dogs. So I really admire him for doing that. I should have done that. I think that after that, after our third speaker, we'll maybe have a short break for a few minutes. Maybe we have a few snacks over there, and then we'll let Rob figure out his electronic issues. Rob Laidlaw, the director of Vivisection Canada, is going to be the next speaker. He's also another longtime animal activist, and he's a specialist in captivity issues, as the name of his organization, Vivisection Canada, suggests. And he's an expert on these issues, but he's been involved in many other campaigns. There's a lot of other animal advocacy organizations in Canada, so he has a lot of background and knowledge about these issues. He's also an author of several children's books, and one of the recent ones that he's done is called No Shelter Here, which is about the situation of homeless dogs and what we call stray dogs. The people and the organizations who are working to help these animals. So looking forward to hearing his talk. I think that what he's doing now, working on children's literature, is a really important and effective way to change the consciousness of our society and to make this society one in which we all like to live. So after Rob, we're going to move on to a different type of canid. We've been looking at dogs mostly up to now, and the next two speakers are going to look at different types of canids. Leslie Sampson, who's a local urban wildlife and what she calls nature literacy. We'll look forward to hearing about that. And finally, last but not least, Hannah Barron, who's joining us from another organization in Toronto called Earth Roots, which is a small group, but one that I like quite a lot. Grassroots organization. They've been active for a couple of decades now, I think. And, I first heard of them when I was working on issues in the Horn of Africa. We did a little kind of joint project with them many years ago. Hannah's participated in the Eastern Wolf Survey and taking students out into Algonquin Park to show them wolf habitat, maybe some wolves if they're lucky to see one. And she is looking at how wolves have spread out from Algonquin Park into other areas, which is kind of dangerous for them to do. Just a few days ago in the news, there was a report from Saskatchewan announcing a bounty on wolves, $250 each if you can kill one of them. So Canada's becoming a dangerous place for wolves. But she's going to talk about living with wolves and how we can have better attitudes towards these other animals. So a really interesting lineup of speakers, and let's go ahead with Keri, because she has to head off soon. Excellent.
Thanks very much, John, and thank you to both John and Liz for organizing this event today. It's really, really wonderful to see this kind of thing happening here at Brock. It makes me really proud to be part of the faculty here. As John said, I do actually have to dash out and teach today. Unfortunately, I can't stick around for the rest of the day. And my sincere apologies. I would really, really love to hear all these wonderful sounding presentations. So if you see me leave, this is the reason. I do have a class later today. So I'm an art historian, and I look at the history of visual culture in activism. And so today I'm going to be talking about the representation of dogs in early anti-vivisection activism. It's a very specific, tiny little piece of my larger research project, but it seemed to fit with the focus of today's theme. And so the time period that I'm looking at today in my larger research project is the late 19th century and the early 20th century. And you may be wondering why this might be relevant for us today as activists. My argument, and I hope I can persuade you in the 15 minutes or so that I have, I should keep my timer here, is that I think that the roots of activism today stretch back to the time period that I'm looking at now in this presentation. There's a long legacy that we are still living with in terms of representation, how we think about activism, how we think about techniques. And I think that we have a lot that we can learn and take from these early advocacy groups and activist efforts. I also like to focus on this time period, the late 19th and the early 20th century, because in terms of the history of art and history of visual culture, it's a fascinating time period. This is the time period where, for the first time in history, it was relatively cheap and easy to reproduce images. And think about that for activists. Think about how important that would be. You have a powerful image and you want to get that out there in the world. At this historical moment, we finally were able to do this with relative ease, and it didn't really cost a fortune to do so. So my title, referring to this age of mechanical reproduction, of course, if you're familiar with the writings of Walter Benjamin, you can see that I'm playing with his words there. But that has to do with this time period where we're thinking about how images can work, how they can be reproduced, and how they can be easily circulated. So, I'm going to start with this image. I've just brought in a collection of images from my research that explore how dogs are represented in these early anti-vivisection efforts. And I think that these early advocates are really doing some sophisticated things with imagery. So what we're looking at on the screen is a print. This particular version is from the Wellcome collection in London, but there are hundreds of copies of this print out there. And it's a print based on a painting by Gabriel von Max, a German artist, called The Vivisector. And I'm showing you the print here because, again, I want to talk about the ways in which these images would have been circulated and consumed in a broad context. So an oil-on-canvas painting like von Max painted in 1883 would have hung in a gallery, and only people at that gallery at that time could see it. What I'm interested in is how that image then gets reproduced, circulated, recontextualized, and how new meanings are made through activism. And so the print here becomes really, really important. So what we're looking at then, if you have a look at the image, in the very center of the composition, and our eyes are drawn there because of the light, the use of shading, is this female figure. She's the personification of virtue. And if you look closely, you can see in her arms she's cradling a little puppy, a little dark puppy, who she's just rescued from the table in front of the elderly gentleman next to her. And he, of course, is the vivisector from the title. And if you look even closer, you can see on his table he's got apparatuses to hold this puppy down in place. He was about to experiment on this animal. This personification of virtue sweeps in, rescues the puppy, and all is well. In her other hand, you can see she's got an old scale. The two trays, of course, weighing to see which one is weighed more. On the one tray is a human brain, on the other tray is the human heart. And it's the human heart that, of course, is weighing down the scales. The implication here is pretty self-evident. For Von Maxen, the artist who engraved this image, then, the idea that compassion over reason was something that we should be pursuing in the modern age. So, very important painting, but as I said, the reproduction becomes even more important. In the 1880s in London, this was circulated and sold to raise money for anti-vivisection efforts. In the 1890s in Philadelphia, the American Anti-Vivisection Society did a big run of this print, and they encouraged all their members and supporters to not only buy it, but to display it in their homes. And I think that becomes really important and illustrates what I was saying earlier, how we take these visual messages out of their original context, gallery perhaps, and by putting them in this domestic space, there's sort of a very interesting blurring of public and private that's going on at this time in our history, not only of activism, but also of society. So really, really important. I could say so much about all of these, but I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to go through relatively quickly. Another way in which images were reproduced and used in this time period had to do with situations like this. So Frances Power Cobb, the great 19th century anti-vivisection activist, who many of you may have heard of, stumbled upon a pretty sophisticated way to think about visual culture and how to use images. When she was protesting against vivisection, she was often attacked for being sentimental, for being somewhat crazy, for being overly dramatic, and often these criticisms were very gendered. People decided that because she was a woman that she had this sort of sentimental bias and didn't really understand science, didn't really understand why vivisection was necessary. So to counter those critiques, Frances Power Cobb came up with an idea to take images directly out of scientific manuals. Manuals that were showing vivisectors how to experiment on animals. And so she took images directly from those manuals and put them in her leaflets as a way to counter those charges of being overly dramatic, overly sentimental. So she would argue then these are exactly how they appeared in the scientific manual. I'm not making these up, in other words. And so you can see here on the left there's a page from one of these manuals. This is from one of Claude Bernard's books. This one's from 1879, a French physician that Cobb particularly hated. And then this is a pamphlet, a 31-page pamphlet that she produced in the 1880s called Light in Dark Places. And I've just isolated a page from each one so you can see that there is, in fact, the exact same image reproduced in each. Now, if we had more time, I would talk to you about how, even though the images are identical, the context in which they were viewed, of course, changed a lot. The text around it, the sort of context in which the reader was situated, does very much influence the meaning. But for the purposes of our discussion today, I just wanted to highlight then this very interesting use of images and also the way images are reproduced and recirculated, how these new meanings can be generated. Edmund Landseer, I don't know how many of you are familiar with him. He was a British artist in the 19th century, very, very popular in his time. He was a favorite of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. He really was quite a very, very famous and well-known artist in his day. He's very much fallen out of favor today. In art history, you almost never even hear about him, largely because he painted animals. And many art historians have dismissed this as a very trivial subject. I am not one of them, as you can probably imagine. So I've been starting to do some work on Landseer and how his work perhaps functioned in 19th century advocacy campaigns. Now, Edmund Landseer was most active at the beginning of the 19th century, and he certainly loved animals. There's no doubt about organizations that I'm focusing on here with anti-vivisection didn't even exist until after Landseer's death. So just giving you a bit of background, but he painted these gorgeous images of animals. He was a member of the Royal Academy, he exhibited all over the place, and his paintings became very well known because of the engravings, once again, that were made of them. So they were circulated, widely reproduced, and people became very aware of Landseer's imagery because of the reproduction. So, take a look at the date, 1838, a distinguished member of the Humane Society. In this case, the Humane Society referred to here is actually an organization not rescuing animals as we may assume, but actually rescuing humans from marine accidents. So if a shipwreck happened, the Humane Society would go out, would rescue the people that were drowning, and dogs played a really important role in this, specifically Newfoundland dogs, which is what's depicted here. They're very, very well known and celebrated for their marine rescue abilities. And so here Landseer is celebrating then this ability of this dog to be selfless, to go out, to rescue humans, to be part of these heroic efforts. So, this is the original painting. In 1875, 2 years after Landseer died, Francis Power Cobb formed the Victoria Street Society for the Protection of Animals from Vivisection. And you can see the logo that she's chosen to use here features Landseer's dog prominently. And again, I think Francis Power Cobb was so sophisticated in her use of images. She knew that this particular dog would be instantly recognizable by people in Britain. This was a dog that was famous because of this artwork and because of the reproduction. And so when she adopted this dog into the logo, she was doing it deliberately, on purpose. We can assume that an animal activist organization will use animal imagery, but what I'm arguing is that the specific animals chosen actually are quite relevant. So the reproduction then of this dog, this dog who has these selfless qualities, these brave qualities, who would go out into dangerous waters to rescue humans, was part of this central message. Other organizations as well started adopting Landseer imagery. This is from around the time of the First World War in London. Another organization, again, adopting the same image, the same dog, appealing for people to join the organization, to donate. What I find really interesting about this particular version is that you can see there's the addition of text that was not in the Landseer painting. Save me, I would save you. Of course, giving voice to this dog, and again, talking about this legacy of Newfoundland dogs, rescuing and saving humans, and asking us why we wouldn't do the same for them, why we would not save them from vivisection. Another Landseer painting that was really taken up a lot by anti-vivisection activists in the late 19th century. This is Saved. Again, similar theme. There's a Newfoundland dog rescuing, in this case, a young child who was drowning in the ocean. And the symbolism here is just so fantastic. You can see the dog is clearly exhausted. His eyes are sort of gazing heavenward. The sky is parted. It's very Victorian in those sorts of compositional details. But once again, we see it reappear several decades later. So it was painted in 1856, exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1856. But in 1890, it was on the cover of this leaflet, this activist leaflet, Vivisection in America. So once again, it's taking that original message from the painting and transposing it into an anti-vivisection context. Landseer, as I said, was long dead by then, although I like to think he may have been happy about this. He was very much an animal lover. But certainly this is not something that he himself envisioned his images would be used for. This is a really important pamphlet. This comes from the collection of the New York Public Library called Hell at Close Range. This was published about 1906. I don't know if you can read at the top there, but whoever donated this to the New York Public Library had written in handwriting across the top of the pamphlet. And it says, "The dogs appeal from torture, quote, save me, I would save you." Again, there's that phrase repeated, putting voice for the dog in this context here. And so the images then are very, very fascinating in this pamphlet. The first one, and I know it's pretty small and pretty hard to see, is an image of a number of scientists and experimenters standing around a table. Again, there's instruments of vivisection meant to open up the dog's body. This is just before the experimentation is about to take place, and here on the center of the table is this dog with his paw up, sort of begging, appealing to these men to have some compassion, to have some mercy. The bottom image here, if you could make it out by squinting, it's very, very tiny, and I blown it up as big as they could. Again, is a reproduction of Landseer's saved image. And underneath, I'm just going to read what it says, because it's very tiny, and I know you can't read it from where you're sitting. It says, Professor Schaefer from England has lately received a license permitting him to continue his experiments on drowning dogs without anesthetic, then resuscitate. That's all the text says. So, the inclusion of this specific image of a dog rescuing a human from drowning, juxtaposed with this text telling us that the scientist is in fact purposely drowning dogs, forces us to ask the question about who really is behaving like a beast here, quote unquote. And of course, the author of the pamphlet wants us to understand that if the dog is the one being noble and brave and loyal and good and all of the things we value in society, and in fact it is the humans that are behaving, quote unquote, like a beast. If we take some of the language from the pamphlet. Same thing going on here. This is a advertisement from the New York Anti-Vivisection Society. This is early 20th century, again, comes from the collection of the New York Public Library. Same theme going on here. We have two images juxtaposed with one another. The smaller one in the top corner, again, it's a scene of a laboratory. There's a dog that's about to be experimented on. The dog is sort of reaching up, putting his paw up on the scientist's arm, and the scientist is literally turning away, looking away from this appeal to mercy. The larger picture, of course, the dog is diving in to save a human from drowning. So once again, it's asking us to think about the choices that we as a society are making, and how come this species who has been so kind and so good and so loyal to us, we're not returning the favor. Just checking the time here. Yeah, right on 15 minutes. This is the final image I wanted to share with you today. I just love this image. There was a competition, an art competition. A lot of these activist groups in the 19th century and early 20th century had competitions for people to draw or write or send things in. There was very large participation from the membership. And so this is a poster contest that was held in 1906. Basically, again, it's an anti-vivisection theme. This was the winning entry, and it was reproduced in posters, postcards, all kinds of leaflets. So we can see these animals. There's a cat, rabbit, dog, monkey, sort of gathered together, cowering together for comfort with one another. And I don't know if you can make it up from where you're sitting because there's sun streaming on it, but you can see the shadow of the knife, literally, as the text says below, a hand with the knife coming for them, and they're crying out collectively, help. Once again, there's that beautiful handwriting along the side. I wish I knew the person that did this. I would love to go back in time and meet them. The handwriting says, save us, we will save you. So that linking between image and text becomes such an important tool for awareness to think about what it is we're doing to these animals. As I said, I could go on for hours. I'm going to leave it there, but I'm happy to talk later. I have to leave, but if you want to email me or get in touch with me, I'm happy to chat more about these images. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Keri. Do you have to leave right this minute?
No, I'm going to stick around for a little bit.
Okay. Could we ask you maybe one or two questions?
Please do, yeah.
Can I ask the first one?
Go ahead.
Well, really fascinating talk. And I'm wondering, you mentioned a bigger project that you're doing. Are you working on like the history of anti-vivisection imagery? Is that a project?
I'm actually writing a book on early images in activism. So this
Okay,
is
so
one
you're not going to
chapter.
take it right up to present.
The book I'm currently writing is focused 1880 to the First World War. And one chapter is definitely on vivisection. There's other things in there as well. Yeah, there's current stuff happening too.
Yes, because I was interested to know what you might be thinking about current images of anti-vivisection campaigns. And do you see continuities or big differences?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of important continuities. I think the idea that we can put voice on these or to these animals through the use of image and text, I think that's continued largely today. If you think about campaigns you see about anti-vivisection today, there's often these sort of, it's not the same language, save me, I save you, but that spirit is still there. There's also this idea that activist groups can perhaps be the voice of the voiceless. That continues today. But I also think this reproduction of images, sometimes taken out of context, and I think we need to be mindful of that. Just like Frances Parakov sort of took them out of context, and so sometimes her meanings weren't as clear as maybe she had hoped. That sometimes happens as well. We'll get an image from one of these experiments, we'll circulate it on Facebook or whatever, without the larger story. And sometimes I think we need to think Absolutely. And I think that's why the Lancia images are probably so popular and so successful, because they don't do that. In fact, they sort of turn the tables on that, and they present this beautiful, noble animal who's doing all these beautiful things, and why wouldn't we want to, be kind to that animal? So what Frances Parakov did with those scientific images, I think, is very interesting, and she's quite isolated in that in the 19th century. Not a lot of other